We were just at the Philly Art Museum for the Surrealism exhibit. And there was a lot of like film that was happening in the middle. And I was like just in the middle of the exhibit. And I just was thinking
I hate
about
that.
how I was not experiencing it in a way, because like there are all these people walking in front of me and people like taking pictures of it. I don't know. I was thinking about that the last time I was in a museum. And
The way that they integrate cinema into gallery shows now is not good. I mean, there's too much light in the room.
yeah.
Sound is too low or off even sometimes. There's just people walking by. There's a glare on the screen. It's almost pointless to do it. But they're saying, here's an object that we have to include in the show. It's for you to see. But you don't have to experience it as a film anymore. We're just ticking the box of saying, oh, here's a Man Ray film. Here's a Duchamp film.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is, And, especially since the Man Ray films have been restored so beautifully. I don't know how they were presented at this show in Philadelphia, but they should just have separate showings of these films in their auditoriums that are set up.
Yeah,
I'd even settle for just like there's a small room that you could go into.
Yeah, but even the small room thing is not great in a way because there's usually no door.
Right.
So the light and sound from outside are getting in, even if it's kind of dark enough. And the people coming and going doesn't bother me so much, but the ambient light is a problem. And you see the ambient light problem in a lot of movie theaters now too, because the exit signs are so bright.
Mm-hmm.
The signs, the lights along the carpeting in the aisles is too bright now. Because this happened in a movie theater I used to work at. People trip and fall and then try to sue the theater. So the regulations are such now that the exit signs are too bright and the the lights on the aisle are too bright. And it's ruining projection in some theaters. Not the big theaters, but more like indie theaters that are forced to adhere to these fire department codes.
Yeah.
You really notice it more and more.
Oh, it's
you need
true.
A dim exit sign, not a bright exit sign in a movie theater.
I've found Patrick and I were talking about this because we were talking after reading Algorithm of the Night about our recent like movie or like cinematic viewing experiences. And I was like, no. Like the solution to this is you teach a class and you reserve an auditorium and you make and then you confiscate everybody's phones. And I was like,
that's right. That's exactly correct. Yes.
And that works really, really well.
Yeah.
But there are only a very few times that I've been able to do that. I co-taught a class with a dear friend who's a film studies scholar. We did this psychoanalysis and cinema class last fall. But before that, she was doing this class about like film and religion, and she kept bringing people in, other faculty in, to stage in some way films that were meaningful to them. And I realized that what I did, and I thought about this and I remembered it, or I understood what I had done when I was reading the introduction to Algorithm of the Night, was that I had unwittingly recreated my most important like New York cinematic experience, which was going to see Integrate Silence at Film Forum on opening weekend. Have you seen Integrate Silence? It's the one with the monks. It's like a 3-hour film.
Oh, yes, I know what you mean. I haven't seen that.
Yeah, and it's like, it's almost entirely silent. And they talk for maybe like 10 minutes, and that's in French and Latin. And it is utterly mesmerizing. And we were able to reserve like the big theater at the college to do it. And we dragged the students like kicking and screaming into this experience. Like, hey, it's Monday night and we're going to take away your phones and you're going to watch this 3-hour silent film about monks. It was wonderful.
It was a peak experience.
Well, that's great that you did that. Kids are such wimps. I'm just appalled by their inability to put down their phones. They're just addicts, and they can't admit it. I was at a screening. It was a press screening, but at these press screenings, other people are invited a lot of the time, of Marty Supreme when I was in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman sitting in front of me looked at her phone every 75 seconds.
Ugh.
I counted the amount of time she looked at her phone. It was like 138 times, which, at one point she was looking at photographs of bowls of pasta,
Well.
And
Did you say anything?
I finally, at the pasta bowl, I gave her a light tap on the shoulder, and she looked at me and she was very upset. I was with someone else, and when the movie was over, this woman was with like 6 other people, including her mother.
Mm-hmm.
They turned around and looked at us like they were going to say something, and I was like, "Come on, say something."
Manja, let's do it.
Let's discuss this. But they didn't. They wimped out because they're wimps. These phone people are wimps. I have a great story about this. This was a while ago. It was the first time there was a Mikio Naruse retrospective in the U.S. for many, many years, and was at Film Forum. And I went to an afternoon show of a film, Traveling Actors.
Okay.
It's from 1934 by Mikio Naruse. But it was about 2 guys who were like in a vaudeville act as a pantomime horse. So this is a black and white Japanese film from the 1930s.
Okay.
It was an excellent film. But a school teacher came in with like 12 7th graders and sat them all down before the screen. And then the movie started, and it was a Japanese film in black and white from the 1930s, and they had no interest in it. So they all began looking at their phones. And sitting in front of them was a guy who was a regular there, one of the cinemaniac type of people.
Yeah.
Kind of looked like a biker. He wore like black fingerless gloves and a denim vest and had a beard and mustache. And he turned around and he grabbed one of the kids' phones and he threw it into the front of the theater below the screen.
Nice.
And the kid whose phone he'd snatched said to him, You can't do that." And he said, "I just did do it." Then he sat back down and just watched the movie. So the teacher at that point said to all the kids rather loudly, "Okay, everybody, that was a Japanese movie." And like got them all to stand up and they all left. Well, then the kid had to go scramble to get his phone.
I'm sure.
On the way out, so it was comic to everyone in the theater.
A change of genre.
Yes.
I have dim memories of an art house cinema I went to with a friend many years ago, but their whole thing was at the beginning of and no matter what they were screening, they would screen the opening bit from Juzo Itami's Tampopo, where the gangster sort of, it mirrors, for people who haven't seen this, right, I guess describing a film is already a difficult enterprise in this medium, but like you're it's a fourth wall breaking thing where literally this Japanese mafioso walks into a theater and starts looking into the screen as you are looking into the screen showing the Japanese mafioso in the theater, and then he would proceed to like threaten you and like enact these kind of like really sort of caricatured Yakuza style like gestures about how people who talk during movies, they're gonna get it right, and why are you bringing food that you need to open that makes crinkly? And it was perfect every single time because it just interpolated you, and it was like, don't do this.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because this week Alamo Drafthouse announced that they're going to do all their food orders by phone now.
Oh fuck.
So the whole point of Alamo Drafthouse was that you couldn't talk on your phone. You got kicked out of the theater if you did those things. And you filled out the little form and you put it out, and a waitress came and then brought you your, bourbon chocolate shake while you're watching Stalker by Andrei Tarkovsky. That's something that's in my other book. That happened during a screening. And now they've switched to a phone. So you have to actually take out your phone to make the food order. And I don't know why they're doing this, but they promoted it as somehow supportive of the film going community. Like it's less disruptive than filling out the little form.
I've seen people posting online photos of, I guess it's a trend in the Netherlands, where like the whole thing is second screen theaters. So you have like, you're supposed to be there, not just with like, I don't know, like your waffles or whatever the fuck the Dutch are serving in these things, but also your laptop. And so like people, it's an entire theater and everyone's just working or like doing other, or like live blogging.
I've not heard of this at all. I would love to see an article about that.
It looked like hell. I mean, it looked like a completely just excruciating experience of sensory dispersal, and so against the grain of,
well, especially for the Dutch, they're such purists about slow cinema.
I may be slandering them. They may have been the Danes. I don't even know. I'll double check on this one. But I will say that my experiences of just thinking about like my favorite movie going experiences, apart from I guess like going like the Ziegfeld or like getting a sense like, oh, this is the old movie palace kind of thing.
The Ziegfeld was great. I mean, that was a phenomenal theater. It's very sad that closed several years ago now.
with like
A Raging Bull there in a revival once. It was like watching scenes taking place on another planet.
I saw Jurassic Park there opening night. It was absolutely packed. Also saw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 opening night, and we were the only people there. But there was something about like the walls that had the crushed silk, like kind of old West Bordello style decor that was just amazing. But for me, it's always going underground to like I love like a brutalist concrete poured structure, and you got to go into it, right? So I think like Lincoln Center had one of these. The Harvard Film Archive.
I think you mean Lincoln Square.
Yeah, Lincoln Square. Harvard Film Archive was famously designed by Le Corbusier.
Yes, which was I like spent weeks of my life there, just like cutting classes because I don't like Pasolini Marathon. It's great, but like it's like literally you descend into the cave, and it's so snug, and then you enter this entirely radically different space, and it just something about that whole experience is so, well, I don't want to be like over the top psychoanalytic. It's not just like back to the womb, but it definitely focuses you in a certain way. And just having a million other things pop up in front of you, let alone like eating a cheeseburger, just I don't, that doesn't work for me.
Cheeseburger is the least of it. There used to be the Angelica in New York City is like this still.
Yeah.
And so
I love
there
the
used to be
Angelica.
I love the Angelica too. People disparage it, but I love it. There used to be a theater in Boston called the Beacon Hill.
Yeah.
Both of these were underground, and you can hear the subway.
Yeah.
You can hear the subway going by. Like in the Angelica, you can hear the subway.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's a positive thing. I'd like to hear the subway going by when I'm in a movie. You know, trains in the cinema are similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is not a novel observation of mine. It's even in Day for Night, the Truffaut film. And it doesn't disrupt the movie like sound from other theaters does, or sound from outside the auditorium if they leave the door open or something like that. It's very pleasant to hear the subway. I don't know why people disparage that. I guess that's pretty low on the list of things to be bothered by these days in movie theaters.
Well, it's sort of like if the train analogizes to the film experience in a cinema, then the car is the like not direct to video, but the like you wait 3 weeks now and it's just in your home.
Well, cars are very cinematic too. I'm not quite sure about that.
I just mean about like
Uber.
Yeah, or like with the Hyperloop underground tube things, right? I mean, I'm thinking about what you're laying down, Abby, and I'm thinking about this in relation to
I'm thinking about the public versus private aspect of it.
And this is what I admire so much about your work.
But also, trains are going where they're going. Yeah. Like you can get on board.
Like you're not controlling.
You're not control. That's what I mean.
That's very essential to the film going through the projector.
Right.
Right. It's the same.
Exactly.
The whole point of the cinematic experience in a movie theater is that you don't control it.
Right.
It starts and stops without you.
Yes.
And you can't pause anything to get up to go to the kitchen or to the bathroom or wherever you want to do to check your email, any of that stuff. It happens whether you're there or not. Without that, you're not really in the presence of the cinema in a way. This is why home viewing is really for reviewing. Not reviewing in the sense of writing a piece of criticism, but for a second viewing of a film or third viewing or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I'll just get this out of the way. What I think both of you are speaking to is what I admire so much. One of the several things I admire so much about your work, and you're my favorite film critic writing today, right? And in that
he's not just saying that because you both write for N+1.
Yeah, no, I mean this very sincerely, and I'll have flattering things to say about your style and humor, etc. Right? But I think I'm reminded of, I don't know, like Warshaw or even like Stanley Cavell or someone but like these people who are attuned not just to the thing that's appearing sort of on the within the frame, but to the experiential kind of surround, the context, and this way in which you are entering. It's such a paradoxical space that feels so very modern and associated with sort of technologies of modernity and conditions of both like anonymity, but also vulnerability and connection, right? Like alienation and oftentimes like raw affect, but also solidarity and other people in the space with you in what I mean, even could be kind of like a crude democracy, if you will. And that's such a rare experience in general that I'm so invested in holding out for that as a space where it can happen. And I can't really think of anything else that comes close to it.
Well, I completely agree with that, of course. I mean, the great thing about the cinema and the thing that appeals about it to cinephiles and critics is this sense of that it's another life, that's a dream life.
Yeah.
But when you dream alone at night, as Joseph Conrad wrote, we live as we dream alone. But in the movies, in the theater, you're not alone, and even if you are alone, like you could be the only person there, like you mentioned, the possibility of others being there is present, no matter what. In fact, when I saw the movie Blue Moon not that long ago, I was the only person in the theater. And like 10 minutes into the movie, someone came in. And I was like, why is he coming in late? You missed the first 10 minutes of this. But you can't resent that, really. But it's strange when that happens, because it takes you out of this kind of false reverie that you're in when you're by yourself there. It reminds you that it's actually a public space.
You're listening to Ordinary Unhappiness, a podcast about psychoanalysis, politics, pop culture, and the ways we suffer now. I'm Abby Cluchin.
I'm Patrick Blanchfield.
And today I am so delighted to introduce A.S. Hamrah. A.S. Hamrah is the author of The Earth Dies Streaming, film writing 2002 to 2018. He's the film critic for N+1 and writes for a number of other publications, including Harper's, Book Forum, The Nation, the New York Review of Books, Fast Company, The Baffler, and the Criterion Collection. He has worked as a movie theater projectionist, a semiotic brand analyst in the television industry, a political pollster, a football cinematographer, and for the film director Raul Ruiz. He produced the feature-length documentary Bunker, directed by Jenny Perlin, which was the opening night film at the Museum of Modern Art's Doc Fortnight in 2022. He lives in New York. And Scott is also the author of two brand new books, Algorithm of the Night, Film Writing 2019 to 2025, and Last Week in End Time Cinema. And it is those two books that we are gathered here today to discuss. Scott, welcome to Ordinary Unhappiness. We're so excited to talk with you today.
Thank you.
I think Ruiz's Time Regained is just an amazing movie, and I would love to talk about Bruce, but that's another matter. I want to plug these books, even for people who are not necessarily in the market or habit of reading books about film, or who think that a book about film has to be like kind of like a monograph, or something that you're familiar with the film in question in order to read.
You don't have to be.
Yeah, and in your work and these collections are, again, I have a hard time thinking of other contemporary examples, but they are readable, sometimes very, very short, light, but masterful accounts of both what happens in these films and their significance, but also just sort of processing them in a way that is stylistically and intellectually rewarding in its own right. So I found myself compulsively reading pages upon pages about films I had never seen and most likely never will see, but still getting something out of it, alongside also reading interesting things that you also do, which are like portraits of what it's like to be at a festival and just the collective experience. And so I just want to, for people who want to consume good culture writing, period, I just want to plug your work to them.
Well, thanks for that.
And I will say, before I ask you my first question, I love the way you hate things. That's one.
I don't consider myself to be a hater.
I don't think you are a hater, but one of the things that I really enjoyed was coming across some films that I feel like were generally critically well received that you did not like, that I hated with The Fire of a Thousand Suns. And I just felt so vindicated. Because I would just be like, I'm angry about this movie, and you would have this perfect sentence that would go off in a direction that I didn't expect it, and I was like, "Yep, that's it. That's the thing."
Well, thank you. I wonder what movie you mean, though, or movies.
There were several, but regular listeners of this podcast will know, because we did an episode on Dune and Dune 2, that I absolutely hated the Villeneuve adaptation, and I felt so vindicated.
Well, I find those films difficult to take seriously, and I think that was reflected in my reviews of both of them.
I would concur with that. Okay, so Scott, you have had such an interesting life that has brought you to being a film critic, and I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about your path and some of those stops along the way.
Well, from a young age, I was kind of writing film criticism, and I would just send it to my cousins or other people. But I didn't have the desire to become a writer necessarily, or a film critic. So I did a lot of other things. And also, in the 90s, I did zines. I worked on a zine called Hamrah with other people in Boston. And, that's kind of when I became a writer. But before that, I didn't necessarily want to be a writer. I was doing other things. But I worked in movie theaters. I did a lot of things kind of around movies. To be a writer, as you know, is to be alone. You're alone all the time. And when you're a film critic, it's kind of, you're kind of doubling your loneliness, because you see movies, by yourself a lot of the time. So people that become film critics have to be people that are kind of attracted to that, to being alone that much. So a film critic is a writer that just likes to be alone more than other writers, which is already a lot. And you also have to, like we were saying before, the films represent a kind of alternate space or dream life. And you have to be willing to, or attracted to, living living inside of that.
Yeah.
Which is, not the best thing in a way for a human being to do. I think it's, I think it kind of deforms you in some ways, but if that's what you want to do, you just have to do it. It's a compulsion. Cinephilia is a compulsion, kind of. And you mentioned Raul Ruiz a minute ago, who I worked for at one time. There's a film he made called Life is a Dream that's kind of about this, that's very pertinent today, because it takes place inside of a movie theater. And, we see the film, on the screen is, interpolated into the other action. But then the activity happens in the movie theater that is as allegorical as what's going on in the film that's being watched. And it's kind of a film about, I say it's pertinent now because it's a film about the dictatorship in Chile, even though it was made in France. And it's about how to live within a structure of memory and dreams when you're in exile. That's what Life is a Dream is about. And it's kind of based on the Calderón play, but very loosely. And it's a beautiful film as well, like all his films, the colors, the colored filters, and so on. But it's to me, it's like a kind of a foundational explanation of being a cinephile or a film critic, especially at a time of political repression. The character in the film has memorized a lot of films, or a lot of the films that we're seeing, so that he can recall the shots and the dialogue and everything about them. And it's really kind of amazing film. And just as Ruiz's Time Regained is the best Proust adaptation, this is kind of the best film in a way about the condition of being someone that does that a lot. And, the reason the Proust film is so good, I think, is because Ruiz found a way to depict memory in a way that hadn't really been done before, which was always the challenge in adapting Proust. And Ruiz is one of the directors that shows that everything is possible in front of the camera. There's no need for special effects outside of what happens in front of the camera. If you think about it enough, you can figure out how to do it without special effects. And we see that in Time Regained, especially with the moving stages and the way that the camera switches between scenes and so on. It's a very inventive and intelligent and kind of amazing film. But, I like any film that shows you that you don't really need special effects, so you can do anything in front of the camera. It can all be figured out.
I'm thinking now about, again, some of the lines that kind of land like, forgive me, I'm thinking Baudry on the brain here, but I'm thinking about like that missile going down the chimney that he writes about in the Gulf War essay, but here about how within the course of a single paragraph, you can very like, and it's not just slamming people, right? But very succinctly diagnose a failure to appreciate that essence of cinema or of film as a medium that involves doing stuff in front of the camera or like some sort of emphasis on the effect rather than the content. I was just, again, just pulling off like at random the way your write-up of Inarritu's The Revenant with Leo DiCaprio and the bear ends up is, one thing is certain, Inarritu has finally solved the problem of how to film a realistic bear fight. The next cinematic problem he should tackle is screenwriting. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's true of that movie.
It is.
I think. I don't think you can deny that about that particular film.
Oh.
Again, so I mean, I kind of like that movie.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
People kind of think that means I hate it or something. It's not true. But I don't think of things in terms of being a hater or a liker or anything like that. I just wanted to describe what I'm seeing and what it means, and so on, without being a cheerleader or just someone that gets mad at movies.
Right. No, I mean, and you're clearly not doing the like Siskel and Ebert kind of function of the like thumbs up, thumbs down.
Right.
I wonder if I can ask you to tell our listeners a little bit about the two new books, because they have just come out. And before we, really get into more specifics, can you tell us a little bit more about these, about both Algorithm of the Night and Last Week in End Time Cinema?
Sure. Algorithm of the Night, which is named because of the Claire Denis film Beau Travail, which contains the song Rhythm of the Night by Corona in it.
Mm-hmm.
The rhythm of my life.
The Denis Lavant character we see dancing to that song. To clear that up, a lot of people have asked me why it's called Algorithm of the Night. Some people don't understand that it's a pun for some reason. They've never heard the song Rhythm of the Night, which is strange.
Really?
It's a banger, too. It's a shame.
Mostly older people. And similarly, Last Week in End Time Cinema, a lot of people don't understand that that's a picture of David Zaslav on the cover. So a number of people have asked me why I'm on the cover of the book, which is, amazing. Or why Joe Biden is on the cover of the book.
Oh, no.
And someone asked me if it was John Cassavetes, which was insane. So that's David Zaslav on the cover of Last Week in End Time Cinema, from a like a Getty photo, a news photo. So Algorithm of the Night is a collection of my work, or selections from my work written between 2019 and now. It's just a follow-up to The Earth Dies Streaming, which collected my work for a longer period of time. So it's stuff that I published in N+1 or Harper's or Book Forum or the Criterion Collection, various places, the New York Review of Books. That's what makes up Algorithm of the Night, with the new introduction that the New York Review of Books also recently published online, called A Total Breakdown of All the Easter Eggs. Last Week in End Time Cinema is a collection. It's a collection also, but really it's just a compendium of a newsletter I did for 1 year exactly that was called Last Week in End Time Cinema, that every week I just rounded up bad news about the movies and, kind of boiled it down to 1 or 2 or 3 sentences, and then put all these items in a certain kind of order, like I do with the columns I write for N+1, in which the films are in a certain order that's determined by me, not by the marketplace or anything like that, or by my editors. But so Last Week in End Time Cinema, I knew I was only going to do that newsletter for 1 year. It was like a 1 year project. And so when people had told me it should be a book while I was doing it, in fact, it was the novelist Ed Park that first made me think that I should, I had kind of thought of it already, but he just randomly DM'd me, oh, this should be a book. So I took that seriously. And then Semiotext, fortunately for me, agreed to publish it as a book, just as it appeared when it was a newsletter, with a new afterword that I wrote. So it's kind of a naked presentation of that material, which is what I wanted, because that's how the newsletter was. And I just sent the newsletter to people by email. It wasn't a Substack. All people had to do was sign up for it, and I would send it to them, and they could donate money if they wanted to. And some people did donate money, and I thanked them in the back of the book. But it was free. It was a free newsletter. So that's what the two books are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you, I certainly want to read some passages and ask more specific. So I just wanted to make sure, especially because Last Week in End Time Cinema is such a distinctive piece of writing that people had a sense that like we're looking at two very different kinds of writing here.
That's right.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, because of Last Week in End Time Cinema is kind of something that interviewers, not like you guys, but like newspaper interviewers, let's
Real
say,
interview.
professional journalists, professional entertainment journalists have latched onto, because it's so insulting to the film business as it stands right now.
It really is.
And so a lot of people kind of approach me now like I'm a business reporter.
Really?
It was not the case at all. I'm not an entertainment journalist. I'm not a business reporter or anything like that. But because of Last Week in End Time Cinema, I'm getting a lot more questions about the business, like what's going on with the Netflix deal with Warner Brothers or Paramount. Not just what does that mean for this cinema, but like what are the actual mechanics of that. So I'm not really qualified to talk about that stuff, even though I read about it so much for a year. But it's strange how that book kind of changed people's focus towards me a little.
I want to read a passage from Algorithm of the Night. One thing I learned from Netflix is that the feeling I get staying home to watch a movie is like the feeling many other people get when they are asked to go out and see one. They literally can't get off the couch. I literally can't stay home and not go out. Now I have to. Now I feel like Josh Brolin in Spike Lee's remake of Old Boy, a movie that few people liked, but that was actually good. Like Brolin, my apartment is my cell. Food is brought in. I can do push-ups if I want, till I somehow get out to exact my revenge on the people who can find me, the people whose fault this is. Close quote. And, one of the preoccupations that I think unites Algorithm of the Night and Last Week in End Time Cinema is the changing conditions in which movies are produced. But also, and perhaps more immediately relevant for all of us who aren't directly involved in the film industry, the conditions under which they are viewed. So, if you think about it, even prestige movies spend maybe a few weeks in theaters before you can watch them at home on your couch via a streaming service. And even when you go to the movies, that experience has been fundamentally altered by members of the audience bringing their own second screens, otherwise known as phones, into the theater. And this shift from collective viewing in the theater to individual viewing on the couch, I don't think I'm reaching to say that changes everything about the experience of watching a film. And at the same time, it's clear from your writing that even as your appraisal of the film industry itself is often scathing, your love for film itself as a medium is undiminished. From movie-going as a shared experience in a public space versus streaming in the privacy of the home, from watching movies on a big screen versus quote-unquote content on a phone, something very complicated seems to be happening in terms of both film as a medium artistically and in terms of how that medium is, mediated. It seems to be both a common object and also a question of how we relate as subjects to one another. So I'm hoping we can talk a little about all these ingredients in terms of these problems of frustration and satisfaction as fantasies of primal scenes, as sites of connection and of anomie, and perhaps even our worries and hopes for movies as a kind of cultural touchstone. I know that's a lot, but we can take it anywhere you want, Scott.
Well, the first thing I think to mention is that the passage that you read, I wrote during COVID.
Yeah.
It was a response to being trapped at home during the lockdown when COVID started. When all of a sudden, my life in many ways is defined by going to the movies. And I lived in New York City and I was a professional film critic. So there are a lot of films to go to. I don't like seeing films at home via a link on my computer that's sent to me by publicists. I like to go see it in a movie theater, and I prefer to see it after it's come out, not before it's come out. So even though I do go to press screenings, I prefer to see a movie not at a press screening. So that was a reaction to being locked down in COVID. And I never really had any streaming services until COVID because I didn't need them because I lived in New York City and I had maybe Criterion. That was it, So that's what that was about. And the second thing I think it's important to note in what you were saying is that whatever happens in the Hollywood film industry in the US is separate from the cinema. The cinema and the Hollywood film industry are two different things. that are, of course, intimately intertwined and intertwined and related to each other. But the cinema exists outside of that and apart from it and above it and below it also. So it's not the be all end all of the cinema is what happens in Hollywood. In fact, in the introduction to Algorithm of the Night, I, quote the well-known Godard quote about how I await the end of cinema with optimism. This is what he's talking about when he says that. So today, these things are being conflated more and more, which is the goal of the Hollywood film industry, to conflate them so that they're inseparable. And so that everyone's experience of seeing movies is bound up with what Netflix wants you to do, and that's why Ted Sarandos is always talking about how people don't like going to the movies. They're just blatantly saying things that aren't true. Of course, people like going to the movies. Millions of people all over the world like going to the movies. Now, whether they can get to a movie or whether they can afford to see a movie is a separate story from that. He's trying to imply that this is the future of movie going, no matter what. It's a done deal. I don't think that's true at all. And the low quality of most of their product attests to that. This is why they're so hell-bent on acquiring Warner Brothers. Because, the people at Warner Brothers, despite David Zaslav, the people that produce One Battle After Another and Sinners and other movies that they make still are trying to make movies that are actual movies that people go see in movie theaters. If Netflix acquires that, they'll have the entire back catalog of the American cinema history at their fingertips, which they can do whatever they want with. That should not happen. All the Turner Classic movies should be owned collectively by the people at this point. People think that's funny, but it should be part of they should be part of the Library of Congress. Not just 25 films a year that they pick to save, but everything that was made during the studio system that's owned by Turner Classic Movies now, Paramount, MGM, RKO, Monogram, all these studios. That should be a body of work that is available to everyone. It shouldn't be controlled by one company, which will be Netflix, WBD, if that happens. So your question was complicated. I'm not sure what part to address next. I guess we talked about earlier the collective experience of going to movies. So I guess we kind of covered that in a way.
I mean, we did, but I think we could actually talk about it more. And about, I mean, if you'll humor me, I was going back over my notes from works of French film theory that moved me or spoke to me in one way or another. And there's a passage that I thought of when I was reading the intro to Algorithm of the Night. And it's from Jean-Louis Baudry's Ideological Effects of the Basic Cinematographic Apparatus. It's short, I promise, but really evocative. And it came to mind. I tracked it down as I was reading the intro to your book. And this is what Baudry says. And I mean, I love this essay in general, so I will do my best not to quote too much more from it. But just briefly, no doubt the darkened room and the screen bordered with black, like a letter of condolences, already present privileged conditions of effectiveness. No exchange, no circulation, no communication with any outside. Projection and reflection take place in a closed space, and those who remain there, whether they know it or not, but they do not, find themselves chained, captured, or captivated.
Well, that is very evocative indeed. I'm not sure they don't know. I mean, that's a broad statement, typically broad French statement.
Yes, for sure. But I do think we can linger with the question of why this is such an important experience to preserve, because that feels like an imperative of your work.
Well, in a sense, the experience has already been destroyed by digital cinema.
Yeah.
When he wrote that, he was talking about projected film.
Yeah, this is from 1970. Yeah.
Right. So it's, when you project a movie, you're projecting images on a screen. They're the shadows of the images, and they're shown once every 24 seconds, and they're done on a piece of film. So that movement of the shutter, of the film through the shutter, creates the psychological condition that he's describing. I'm not sure that DCPs do that to the same extent.
Mm.
In fact, there's a Roger Ebert piece about how the 24 frames a second frame rate is the closest to how we dream. And so the faster frame rates aren't like that. That's what, like when you see the soap opera effect on TV, or juddering as it's called, that condition is no longer existing because of the frame rate change. So that's open to debate. That's not psychoanalysis. That's another kind of psychology, right?
Yeah, I wonder though about like the way there is this theme of like mediation and packaging, and I think that we can maybe add some, if not formally psychoanalytic, but at least some like affective, ideological kind of fantasy dimensions too,
Yes.
right? And maybe another way of coming at this is whatever is happening in that darkened space that we're invoking
and idealizing.
Yeah, and idealizing. It's an object that's shared, it's private, it's public, it's Hollywood, it's not Hollywood, right? It's whatever it is, it's fuzzier, and well, it becomes clearer in relation to what I think it's opposed to. And that object seems to be mediated differently and seems to be sort of framed, and we're sort of served up into with a set of expectations that are, that everything that ramify in terms of everything from how audiences are supposed to behave, right? How you're supposed to get amped up for a movie. Oh, this is the movie that, like, show Trump you hate him by seeing this movie. Or isn't this great? Finally, we have this kind of representation in this film. Go support this movie. Or by the same token, think about a critic and like the genre of criticism that you distinguish yourself from, where it's like, like 5-paragraph essay style. This is the latest film from so-and-so whom you know from this. This is what happens in the film. This is this character whom you already know. Like basically all your friends from Hollywood are here. Keep in touch with them. And then you post on Twitter about how this is their best yet, or this is their worst yet, or this glorifies something, or it doesn't glorify something, or it proves something. In other words, it becomes this kind of like not quite like sports betting, sports commentary shit, but it is a type of
like sports betting now. It's becoming like sports betting for sure.
Even
when I wrote The Earth Dies Streaming, there's a section in the introduction about the gamification of cinema going.
Yeah.
In other words, I think about this line you have actually in the from like 2018, 2019, where you're talking about sort of like the post-Trump crisis faced by audiences, or what seems to be a type of like a post-Trump crisis faced by audiences and critics, where it's like when most critics love a movie, as was the case with Wonder Woman in this example, the system is working fine. When they don't, critics are destroying the film industry. The studios have the same relationship to the press as Donald Trump. It's love or nothing, and anything less is treason. And that does seem to be a type of like it's a way of interpolating people, and like you're going to consume this and you are going to sign off on it, or you are going to then produce, clips of it or takes about it. And if you consider it in some other terms, right, you can say you can slam it in one line, but also still kind of like it. You can not waste paragraphs describing, everyone actually does know who, like, I don't know, Samuel L. Jackson is. You don't need to remind people about that type of shit. Like, then you are doing something that is not assimilable in that rising paradigm. And I come back to, just to get very concrete about this, these two sort of injunctions you encounter on the internet all the time, where people will be like, oh, you didn't like this thing? Let people enjoy things. Right. But if you're a critic, your job is not to just like, well, let people enjoy things. Like that's the goal of the manufacturers of the film, not necessarily something you have to ratify in any particular way. And by the same token, I keep thinking about all these little screenshots that I see on Twitter being like, this is peak cinematography. And even in 4K, it's just a blow up of like the shittiest possible Marvel installment.
Yeah. Well,
but produced as that. Yeah.
Yeah. You talk about, you said, well, let people enjoy things. It's the goal of the people that make them to have people enjoy them. That's not necessarily true anymore. First of all, I don't think they care whether people enjoy them, or they're even made to be enjoyable or enjoyed by anyone. They're just products that are made to return a certain amount of money, because there's things that people have heard of before. So increasingly, when you read the trades, or any kind of entertainment journalism, you'll constantly see stories like there's one in the New York Times, I think, recently about how this new this gay hockey drama,
Heated
it's such
rivalry.
a heated rivalry. It's such a big hit, but the people that made it had no idea it was going to be a hit. Or they said this about Sinners too. Sinners is a huge hit. It's such a surprise to everyone at WBD. Why is it a surprise to them? You know, if they're doing things the way that you're describing, it shouldn't be a surprise to them because these things are made to be enjoyed by people. But then when they're enjoyed by people, the executives are surprised. So that's a big change right there. Okay, but you know, you're basically setting up kind of a dichotomy between what happens inside the movie theater, like in the Baudry quote, and what happens once people have seen the movie or before they've seen the movie, when they're no longer in the movie theater. Yeah. And, you know, there's always been ballyhoo and fandom and publicity and stuff like that around the movies. That is not anything new. It's just that you can share it now because of social media, which you didn't used to be able to do. And Letterboxd has changed this too. So Letterboxd has like 17 million users, supposedly. And to me, that's a good thing. It just shows that what Ted Sarandos is saying is not true. Because there's 17 million people that want to log every movie they see and say something about it, even though they're not professional critics for the most part. You know, this instantly disproves what Netflix is saying about the future of film going. Now, a lot of those people see their movies on their computer or on television at home or through some other method that's not paying for a ticket and going to the movies to see the movie. What you're talking about when you talk about all the stuff around the movie is what the studios want you to do, which is basically you're casting a vote by buying the ticket.
Yep.
You're saying, yes, there should be another Zootopia movie, and I'm going to see that now. And that's all that is. And again, that has nothing to do with what's going on in the movie theater when people are watching the film in the way that Baudry is describing it in that quote. So you could say that what happens in the movie theater is happening in the unconscious.
Yeah.
Right. And what's happening outside the movie theater is public. You know, it's something that's being shared and it's being done for certain reasons. Like you said, go see this movie because it's good to go see this movie because this movie supports some cause that I like. You know, and that could be anything, right? It could be One Battle After Another. It could be an Angel Studios film about some religious thing, you know, or about child trafficking or whatever kinds of movies they make, or Reagan bio, or it could be, you know, just like I love this franchise, you know, because I love Jason Statham or something. You know, so there's all the talk around this stuff is not that really that important. So as you know, from my work, I try to totally get away from all of that. And you know, as you know, psychoanalysis and the cinema are intimately linked, and all these things that people say around the cinema can be interpreted in various ways that they're not interpreted. Everything is very literal now. We live in a very literal society. There's an Italian genre film director from like the 50s and 60s mostly, but he worked longer than that, called Domenico Paolella. And Domenico Paolella made all kinds of movies. He made musicals and comedies and police thrillers and nunsploitation movies. But he's most well known for making what are called sword and sandal movies, or peplums, which are like movies about Hercules, you know, that are kind of a joke, right? We're a joke in American culture for a long time because they came to us dubbed into English, and they had some cheesy muscle man in the role of Hercules. He's speaking English, but then he's dubbed into English, you know?
Who kidnapped her?
I don't know. Well, who was it? I don't know.
Why are you certain she was kidnapped if you didn't see it?
Because there was no one to see. From the very moment you arrived in our village, the evil eye has cursed all of our houses. Burn her at the stake! No! Burn her at the stake! She's a witch!
You must die!
No!
This is a very popular form of cinema at one time, right? In the 60s, the first half of the 60s mostly. And Domenico Paolella, those movies are called peplums. Domenico Paolella said that the peplum is the poor man's psychoanalysis. What he means by that is that even in these cheap genre films that he's making, he was kind of a master of these in a way. He's kind of a stylist. There's something going on with the audience that's fulfilling a need they have to have their personal psychology interpreted by these cheap, kind of semi-mythic films. And so that's still true today of genre cinema. So Hallmark movies are like that now, I think, kind of.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that really love those movies, but they don't examine their love for them very much. And no critics really examine those movies either, because they're terrible. There was one I saw called A Pickleball Christmas. I mean, when I say I saw it, I didn't see the movie. I just saw the little square for it on my television screen. So, this function of the cinema as a psychoanalytic tool for people who are poor, or people who are not going to be psychoanalyzed by a professional, still exists, but it's not examined at all. And the reason it's not examined is because of all this concatenation of stuff around the movie that happens when you're not watching the movie. So the Hallmark films are mostly watched on television, of course,
Right.
which is different already than Paulella's day when he said that about going to see a Hercules movie in a movie theater. But it still holds true. And people don't really want to talk about that, because all articles about this phenomenon are always like, I can't believe I'm actually addicted to Hallmark movies. There'll be stories like this in the Times. People aren't approaching the cinema the same way as Baudry did. I mean, he's a French film theorist. Most people aren't approaching the cinema that way anyway. But writers aren't approaching the cinema that way because of the way it's consumed now. So the idea of a director like Domenico Paolella saying that peplums are the poor man's psychoanalysis, no director would say that now about their work. No Hallmark director would have the self-awareness to say that, although they may be self-aware enough to know that the stuff they're making is kind of slightly rancid.
I know a peplum as a kind of piece of or a feature on a piece of women's clothing, but what does it mean in that context?
This refers to the toga, the short toga that the muscle man would
so
wear.
it is kind of the same thing.
Yeah, or like a Roman gladiator skirt, type of thing.
Okay, so it's the same peplum.
I'm not exactly sure which article of clothing is being indicated when that genre is called a peplum. They're called peplums, but that's what it means. Yes, it comes from the clothes, the outfit. Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm thinking about this in terms of your writing on reality TV, which I think we're probably going to ask you a question about next. But you've had this line about this kind of distant sort of meta type of attitude that is encouraged in the consumption of reality TV, like the sort of the guilty pleasure. And as you write it, it's sort of in order to enjoy it, you also have to pretend to enjoy it, and you have to celebrate your enjoyment, which may not be real, just as you have to acknowledge that what you're watching isn't quite real either. And that I think that's, you can't like just enjoy or like you can't even enjoy the symptom of the exploitation film.
I was just going to say the difference between the period of Italian commercial cinema being exported to the US that we're talking about when we say that the peplum is poor man's psychoanalysis versus how people receive reality TV today is exactly the jump in this kind of theoretical model between Freud or Lacan maybe and Zizek.
Yeah.
The way that people treat reality TV is very much enjoy your symptom. They're like, oh, I'm such an addict of this and I know it's bad for me and it's terrible, but it teaches me so much about human relations or something. Or I really love the way it's edited. People make up all these weird excuses for why they love reality TV so much, which, people who were watching peplums weren't doing that. They were just going and sitting in the dark, there's an erotic quality to that too, because those were seen as kind of movies that were liked by gay men.
Yeah.
But it was everyone that liked those movies too. They were huge hits. So, just like action movies are now with Jason Statham or who I mentioned earlier. But this attitude has changed because of the way that the things are received. So when you're watching reality TV shows, you're usually, or not usually, I don't know, but you're watching it on TV at home. You might be with a group. I always associate seeing those things with groups, but maybe most people watch them alone. I don't know. And the enjoyment is very different than watching a movie in a movie theater. It's more like sports. It's more like watching sports, watching reality TV.
I'll buy that. I don't watch reality TV, but in the very few times that Patrick and I have tried to do it together, he takes this sort of like, psychoanalytic training thing. He turns it into like spot the trauma.
It's always
basically he's like, oh, this is where this person was really hurt. And we watched the Marie Kondo reality TV series together, and it was just like, it was so excruciating. And I was like, okay, this is why. Anyway, that we turned it off immediately. I really do want to linger with your work on reality TV and also like knowing your background. And I would love if you want to say anything more about this, but you don't have to, about your background as a semiotic brand analyst in, working in the television context. But I loved the essay that you wrote. It's originally in book form, but it's also in Algorithm of the Night, about Emily Nussbaum's reality TV book, Cue the Sun. I have not read Emily Nussbaum's book on it, but in it, you really, you go for the jugular, right? Like, you thoroughly indict reality TV, and you state very clearly, like, we would be better off if these shows did not exist, if they had never been made.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that you can talk to us a little bit about how you understand the relationship between film and television, and perhaps about your, I was writing this and I was like, is it your disdain for reality TV or like distress over it? However you want to put it.
I mean, contempt, I guess.
Contempt,
Justified moral
okay.
contempt, yeah.
Contempt. And I'm interested also, especially in light of the conversation you and Patrick have been having about all of these things that are like epiphenomenal to the watching of film that happen like afterwards, on whether it's on Letterboxd or it's on Instagram or whatever. Whether that feeling of contempt, whether it extends to short form video like YouTube or YouTube
No.
Shorts. No,
It doesn't. No,
it doesn't.
I have no problem with TikTok or Instagram Reels or any of that.
You don't. Okay, that's
In fact,
fascinating.
I think those things are better than television.
Really?
More
Like
interesting.
all television, like Toot Court? Like,
Yeah. Yes, all of it.
really?
Yeah. Now, television as it exists now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with those things. I'm not on TikTok though.
Oh, well, that's why you don't have a problem with it, because your brain is still intact.
But I'm on Instagram, so I see Instagram Reels and stories all the time.
Doesn't it? And it doesn't make you feel bad?
No, it doesn't bother me at all. Like I said, I find it more interesting than TV. TV to me is totally degraded and pointless now. And I can't. Although I do think that reality TV will continue to be interesting to historians of the future.
Yeah.
You talk about trauma, like identifying who's traumatized. They're all traumatized. Yeah. They wouldn't be doing this if they weren't traumatized.
Yeah.
No person who's not traumatized goes on a reality television show, unless they're like the hosts of a fashion reality show or something, or the judges on Dancing with the Stars or something, or American Idol. Although arguably Simon Cowell is a very traumatized person also. Although I'm not qualified to analyze him, I just know that I'm repelled by him.
This is also against Paris Hilton too, right? I mean, who's a graduate of all those like Ski-Doo academies, right? And has said that part of the reason she's doing the career is because she'll feel safe after she earns $2 billion and only until then. And it clearly is she's an extreme case in this way, but I think it's worth saying, even though many people already know this, and you've spelled this out explicitly in the book, like the political economy of reality TV is profoundly like malevolent, whether it be coming from like the writer's strike or just even, and here I think about the work of scholars like Laura Hewlett Blair and others who have been like having people compete for basics like social goods or like makeovers or a new home is an artifact, not just of hollowing out, so replacing actors with people who are not, guild, or writers with people who are actually just producing, but literally of just the withdrawal of the social safety net and producing this kind of competitive dynamic. And it does, as an artifact, kind of give back reality in this really horrible way, but it doesn't, again, there's nothing about it that seems
right. Well, that
redemptive,
kind of, in that quote that you read of mine about how people enjoy television, reality television, there's the underlying idea that it kind of returns reality to us in some way.
Yeah.
But first of all, Donald Trump proves that reality television is bad.
Yeah.
It's because of reality television that he's the president of the United States now. And it's because of him that, ICE is murdering people in the street.
Yeah. QED.
Yeah. So, yes. So, to speak to the kind of show you're talking about, when I was a semiotic brand analyst for the television industry, one of our clients, which I won't name, had a show that was about a family that had an oil well in their front yard.
The well in the front yard's making 80 barrel a day, and the one in the backyard's making 40 barrel a day, so that's 120 barrel a day. That ain't a bad month for a hillbilly.
Grandmama said the person that strikes oil twice ought to be you.
And they were making, they get a payment by an oil company every month for and then this would turn them into millionaires overnight, and, it's not the healthiest thing to have an oil well in your front yard. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of implications to this that are bad. But in analyzing the audience for the show and what repercussions the show might have, we told our client that, have you ever considered that this is not the best thing for these people? And they're like, what are you talking about? How could it not be the best thing for them? Look at all this money they're getting every month. It's totally changed their lives. So what? They have this giant oil derrick on their property now. It's funny. It's like the Beverly Hillbillies. I mean, the people that make these things are not the most self-reflexive people. And if they are very malign in that regard, because they understand what's going on, but they exploit it anyway. The problem with television that I encountered in my old job was that the executives don't really watch any of the stuff. So they basically had to hire people like me and the company I worked for to watch their shows for them and then tell them what the shows were about. And that's a very strange world to be in. And as a consultant, it was good because, the company made, money from this. And they would fly you out to their headquarters and, do presentations to them on PowerPoint and so on. It's a weird way to make a living. And I only did that job because I needed money and I was lucky to find that job. But the more time you spend with the people making this stuff, the more you realize that all the criticisms of the TV are actually true. And there's been shows on television that are that are good by various standards, but that doesn't really justify any of it. The Sopranos is always used to justify the worst excesses of television, like a show like Bait Car, which I mentioned in that piece.
Undercover deputies drive the Toyota Camry Bait to the drop area, leaving the free car for anyone looking for a free set of wheels. A mobile command post monitors the entire operation, while the team takes up positions nearby.
David, 60 units, bait cars.
Drop facing north on Fuente, just north of Valley.
Bait Car was a reality show that was on True TV, I believe. The premise of the show was we're going to leave an expensive unlocked car on the street, but we're going to put cameras inside of it. So when someone comes along and steals it, we'll have all that on film. Then we'll call the cops when they're driving away in the car too. So that was an actual show. It was on TV, Bait Car. I mean, it's obvious that plays into exactly the kind of repressive environment that we live in now. So just because you like the Real Housewives of Orange County, and that's somehow meaningful to you, like it's teaching you something about being a person today, that doesn't justify any of this other stuff at all, in my opinion.
It seems to me, I think about this in terms of how part of like the pretense of reality TV, right, is of a type of intimacy, but also type of like accessibility, right? Anyone, you could be on this show, right? Anyone could. America's got, well, as you say, like, America's got, I don't know what's going on, but it's got, some people in America have got talent, but a lot of people in America want to show up and show that they have something that they think is talent, right? Like there's this kind of like ethos of, well, again, I'm going back to that movie theater scene where it's like you're in this space where there are others, but you don't know who the others are. They're silent with you, and there's again, I don't want to lean too hard on the Stanley Cavell stuff, but like it's a vision of a type of like you're behind some sort of veil of like some sort of democratic experiment, right?
Right.
And again, I'm not a Zizek'ian either, so I can't do like the obverse, inverse, reverse mirror image of the upside down of this shit is, but like it is something, there's some sort of dark mirroring in the idea of just, you can be on the street and in this panoptic surveillance space or in the party house and anyone can be there. Like it's a much more, well, everything's lit, everything's transparent, and everything's performative promise of participation and of inclusion, when in fact, actually, it's all about competition and, everything is
competition, and it's about fame too. People think they're going to become famous. But then, if you follow along like I did in Last Week in End Time Cinema, that's only about movies. But concurrently, I had to read about all these former reality television show contestants and performers whose lives are falling apart. They commit suicide. The businesses go broke. They go broke. They die weird deaths. They end up doing pornography. The things that happen to people who participate in those shows are usually not very good. The early analysis, the early anti-reality television analysis was a lot of those things that you said, that it's a panopticon, that it's about competition. No, we've kind of moved beyond all that now, because reality TV is just the condition of TV now. The critical diagnosis of it that seeks to expose it has been defeated, essentially. So no one really even thinks about that anymore. That was one of the problems with Nussbaum's book, I think. Although she, wisely started with Candid Camera and Queen for a Day and The Gong Show, which are really the DNA of reality TV before you get to The Real World and Cops, which is the real binary of reality TV. The male female of reality TV is cops on one side and people living in a group house trying to get along on the other side. And despite television's interest in gender and gender dynamics, reality TV really is very binary. There's shows for men, there's shows for women. And just that cops in the real world are TV now, and then everything else is just bad Netflix shows and Hallmark movies, and news, which is completely compromised now. So television is basically collapsing before our eyes, just like the Republic is. And to take it back, this is why I prefer TikTok to television.
I was hoping you were gonna tell us more about that,
because those things are just they're short and they're all kind of interesting, no matter what. I mean, and they're just so much better than TV. And they end, too. The problem with television is that it never ends. It's endless.
See, I like that about television. I think.
You like that? You don't like it?
I do like it. I mean, you might never speak to me again after this, but
I'm interested to hear this.
I prefer television to films.
What? But you're reading Baudry.
Sure, for a class on films. I like films, but I get really sad. I mean, for me, there's a part of television that it's about. I want to spend more time with the characters than I can in 90 to I mean, I guess films are not a tight 90 minutes anymore, but
you like soap operas, basically.
I mean, if we want to call stuff that
episodic television. Yeah.
I mean, if episodic television is soap opera, then sure, yeah, absolutely.
Do you apply this to novels also?
I mean, I prefer to read novels than nonfiction.
But do you want novels to be part of a series of books that follow the characters?
No, but I do like an 800-page book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's movies that are the equivalent of 800-page books. I mean, the problem with television is that it is like a soap opera in that there's no definite ending. So as long as it's getting good enough ratings or whatever they use as their metric now,
right,
they'll continue to make it as long as they can afford to make it. So just a meandering, endless, pointless exercise. And, films are becoming more like that. Like the Fast and the Furious movies are like that.
Yes.
But I still prefer those to television because each one has an end, which means that someone had to figure out how each of the films would end, which doesn't really happen with most television. It's just like turning on the water, I compare it to. It's like you turn on the faucet, the water comes out. People think that that's what it is, And the nature of episodic television reinforces that perception that it's not really made by people so much, despite all the backstage information we have about everything now. That's just like a utility, and you turn it on. That's what streaming is. It even has streaming, and the name is streaming. So, I mean, I just fundamentally don't like that approach. I prefer the cinema because it's contained and, it's more worked out by the people making it. And, also, let's face it looks better.
That I would not disagree with you about.
I mean, it used to. I mean, I had over the holiday, I had to watch, or I didn't have to, but I was with people that wanted to, with their children wanted to watch 2 episodes of Stranger Things. I watched 2 episodes of Stranger Things, which I'd never seen before. And I was shocked by how ugly and amateurish it is.
Trash, yeah.
You know, I mean, every shot is a non-composed amalgam of people sitting around talking or standing around talking in the middle of the frame, and it's completely uncinematic.
Yeah.
There's something about the distribution of labor that kind of happens here, and both in terms of investment, but literally in terms of like trying to make sense of TV plot, particularly once you hit that like 2 seasons sort of like, I mean, Stranger Things, I think is the case in point now. Like the showrunners maybe had an idea of what was going on for the first year, and then
Game of Thrones is the great example of this, I think.
Exactly. It's almost like it's not quite the same thing as we're firing our writers so that instead we're going to have producers egg individuals who are not getting, Screen Actors Guild credit to act out. But there is something in terms of like a delegation of responsibility where it's like, we're just going to do whatever the fuck, and we're going to count on the fans to come up with like lore.
To supplement. Yeah.
They're going to do that work.
So when you talk about how you prefer episodic television to movies, what shows are you thinking about?
Let's see. I think the thing that sold me on episodic television, and this was at like a younger point in my life, was Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Okay.
But also I'm certainly thinking about The Sopranos. I'm thinking about The Wire. I'm thinking about
Justified was great.
Oh, that was good. I mean, that wasn't like
I just like it. I like Elmore Leonard.
But Justified is a great example of when you're like, I want to see these two actors in relation, and like, I want to see this interpersonal and like series of interpersonal dynamics develop for a long time. And it's not that plot isn't instrumental in that. It is precisely that it's instrumental. Like the actual pleasure comes from character development, which I think you have a limited amount. I mean, this is also why I'm a person who's like, I don't think you should make good books into movies. I think you should just let them be books. That's my kind of thing. But I think a lot of it is the pleasure of watching human dynamics of individuals and groups without that hard stop at the end of, 2 hours. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a soap opera.
Sure.
Which is fine. I mean, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is, of course, a great object of academic scrutiny for years now.
Mm-hmm.
She kind of replaced Blade Runner, which was the previous iteration of that.
That's true.
A
movie I like very much.
Yeah, I call that stuff Blade Runner studies.
Yeah.
But, and of course, Buffy was a movie first, too.
It was. It's not a very good movie.
I mean, I'm not interested in evaluating any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I just think that, when we started talking about this, you quoted that passage about that I wrote about being forced to stay at home because of COVID. Okay, so episodic television that you're describing is the ultimate thing that forces you to stay at home. It's like an illness. And
I mean, only if you don't like your home.
Well, I mean, that's true, I guess. Yeah,
I like my home.
It's not,
and I like the person that I watch TV with.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear it. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
You could watch a movie, though.
Yeah, and I do.
When I wrote that piece, I was thinking about how I live in New York City.
Yeah.
I don't live in the suburbs.
Yeah.
I don't live in a place where, like I live now, where everything closes at 8:00 at night. I didn't move to New York City to sit in my house and watch television.
Yeah.
That was the main point of that, in a way. I did not come here, and I'm not alive, and I'm not living this life to sit in my house and watch television. So even though, you could say, well, so then you're living your life to sit in a movie theater and watch movies. No, I'm not doing that either. Watching movies is my way of going out into the world.
Yeah.
But also maintaining a certain separation from it at the same time. And watching episodic television at home is not the same as that.
It's not.
So there are pleasures like you describe in doing that. You're comfy, you're at home, you're with someone you love. You can get up and move around while you're watching it and go make food and come back and do all sorts of things, and you can pause it. They're totally different experiences.
They are.
Yeah. And it just so happens that I am not interested in the one that involves watching episodic television.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, many other people are, and that's what the studios are banking on now as they attempt to completely destroy the theatrical experience of watching movies. And I object to that.
I wonder about structure here. If this maybe sound a little half baked, right? But part of me wants to also say this in light of the fact that I think we've drawn the right connections between reality TV and the Trump phenomena.
Yeah.
Right. I think we could also, paint with a slightly broader brush there and kind of indict a lot of liberal television too here. I think about like To Catch a Predator, right? Which is another one of these, like, we're doing this type of entrapment thing, and whatever happened to Chris Hansen personally, like there are direct lines from that to like grooming, mass hysterias right now, etc. But also I keep thinking about how even in the Bush years, right? Rachel Maddow would end on MSNBC, and then we're going to go to Lockup, like inside America's toughest
Lockup.
prisons. Yeah. Right. So that there was this kind of bipartisan desire for the ideological entertainment apparatus to also showcase the pleasures of not being caught up in the repressive apparatus, right? And the other example that comes to mind here is like Law and Order, right? Which has the perfect character, at least in this classic incarnation of like 23 fucking seasons, right? Of you're going to get half an episode of Law and then half an episode of Order. I guess it's in the opposite direction, right? But like literally, that 30-minute mark, they're going to reprise everything else, and then the court case is going to proceed for 20 minutes, and there's going to be a 5-minute like reversal of everything, and that's the end of the show, right? And you can set your clock by that. You can do work by that. Much of the same way as I guess you can kind of like have all these didactic gestures in every Netflix episode now, where there'll be like how every single episode of the last season of Stranger Things probably has about a 10-minute block where like, so what are we doing now? Oh, did that just happen? Like I kind of like
that's television in general, yeah.
Yeah, it's not only sort of like potentially eternal and ongoing, it's also signposted with this kind of like very didactic function to it. Whereas a movie, and this is the theme that I was picking up in what both of you are saying, the movie ends.
Yeah.
Right? And I wonder if it's not too half-baked to say this, that there's something about the experience of cinema, like that when the scene goes black, right? Or you get even how you get the go fancy, you get the French fin, right? Like it's death.
Right.
Right. It's some sort of encounter to finitude that was not on your own terms.
That's the point of the ending of Vertigo. It just goes to a black screen, and that was also the point of the Paul Schrader film with Ethan Hawke. First Reformed also had that ending. It just ends and the lights come on in the movie theater, and it's very shocking when movies do that.
Yeah,
there's a lot of great films made in the history of cinema where there's barely any credits. Not just avant-garde films, like obviously, most. Like a Warhol Screen Test doesn't have credits or something, or most Brakhage films just have kind of a little scrawl burned into the film that he's done by hand. But like Godard films, where there's no end credits, or Apocalypse Now originally had no end credits. This is an important function of the cinema, exactly as you described it. It plunges us out of that right away, and yet it lingers so much for after the movie and for days and weeks in your life. Television doesn't really do this, and it's not supposed to do that. It performs a different function, whether it's a sitcom or Law and Order. And,
it involves comfort.
Yeah, it involves comfort, but movies involve comfort too, but it's different.
It's a different genre of comfort.
But I'm not really interested in comfort as a aesthetic experience.
Yeah.
I guess.
I don't think it's that interesting as an aesthetic experience. I think it's valuable as a human experience in a time when a lot of people are in need of comfort.
That's true.
But that's a different thing.
But if you're being comforted by the Real Housewives of Orange County, I think that you should think about that. that goes for Law and Order too, which is, so much of television is just propaganda or actual consultants from the CIA working on the shows now and that kind of thing. It's very ideological.
Oh yeah.
In ways that people don't think about at all anymore. And the cinema has been analyzed endlessly from the point of view of the ideological apparatus, right? Television, not so much, and people still don't do that.
It's funny. We've been rewatching Reno 911.
Okay. Oh, man.
You remember that on Comedy Central?
Yeah.
Which I is just an amazing artifact, right? And if people who aren't familiar with this, right, it's a parody of Cops. It goes far beyond there just being like Keystone Cops hijinks. Like they're incompetent racists. Like they're the last people who you would want to be police officers if you were to set the expectations of like what a police officer should be based upon other TV. But in that way, they also resemble what a lot of police officers actually are.
Don't point at him. That son of a bitch. God damn it.
Stop!
God damn it.
Freeze!
God damn, the crack makes him fast. He's headed straight to mountain lion country.
You know what? They'll take care of him.
Mountain lions will get them.
It's a circle of life.
And I'm just thinking about how the show, it goes on for too many seasons too, right? I think like renewal is part of the curse here, and some of the best TV series are the ones that sort of end after the one season. But the capacity of the TV media, TV shows to do something that is properly disturbing or steps you out of the experience further than to get more snacks or to buy the thing you just saw or to check on the kids or whatever, that does seem to be constrained by the medium in some radical way.
Well, the movies have a long history of making fun of cops, of course.
Yeah.
Going back to the Keystone
Cops, yeah.
And there's great directors who refuse to give any credibility to the cops. Like Hitchcock is one of those. There's never really a good cop character in his movies. Although paradoxically, I guess Shadow of a Doubt has that. Maybe his best film. But the good cop character is so bland, in that. But, the propaganda element of TV is very disturbing. And shows that make I don't know. I don't know what to say about Reno 9/11 because I barely remember it now. I've tried to forget a lot of the stuff I saw when I had that job because I had to watch 400 different reality series over 8 years.
That sounds like hell. I hate reality television. I can't. I find it unwatchable.
I was getting paid for it, so it wasn't hell, but it wasn't. I wish I had spent my time differently in retrospect.
Right.
To earn a living, So I don't. I think as a culture we have to move beyond the argument or the discussion about the differences between movies and television and just admit that there are differences.
Yeah. Sure.
And not constantly valorize the act of watching television. Which, a lot of, you see this often in certain critics of a certain, I saw these movies when I was a kid on TV and it really changed my life. And it's great to watch movies on TV. I agree with that. I addressed this in the introduction to Algorithm of the Night. I too, the first John Ford film I ever saw was on television. The first film with Humphrey Bogart I ever saw was on television. Because they would have these things on, the independent television stations all the time. So a lot of science fiction movies, a lot of cheap science fiction movies, a lot of things that form my consciousness, like Zontar, the thing from Venus or something like that. I first encountered on TV. But, this discussion really obscures the thing that is important, which is that television is kind of, not good for people. I think television is worse than social media myself. Although social media is very bad in many ways. Twitter under Elon is terrible, etc. But that stuff doesn't exist without The Apprentice and shows like that already happening. These things were a step to get us to where we are now, and it was a bad step that we should not have taken.
Any conversation with you would not be complete without us getting into both the looming specter of AI and also the way in which everything is IP now. And there's a passage that I loved from Algorithm that I want to read, where you write, in Franz Kafka's story In the Penal Colony, which is about an automated torture device, Kafka writes that we used to have to adjust a few things by hand. But from now on, the machine will work all by itself. I think this is exactly what people dread about AI and why they recoil from it, and also why large corporations are so excited about it. It is an aspect of the kind of fascism predicted by Kafka in the early 20th century. It removes the human element from the cinema, just as the tech industry in general is removing showbiz from entertainment. Close quote. So, you're writing there about AI for sure, but you're also writing in the context of like how everything is just IP. Like there's no new material. Everything is just like iterations of something that someone has successfully solved before. So like if there's Law and Order SVU, then there's Law and Order, like, I don't know, whatever, like TK, like, there's a million things. And given that this is a show about psychoanalysis, and I can't help but thinking about this in terms of what Freud called talking about the death drive, the compulsion to repeat. So can we talk about these sort of twinned phenomena of everything as IP and the rise of AI and what you make of these phenomena in the current and perhaps also future landscape of cinema?
I mean, these are steps towards automation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main thing. I mean, there's something. I mean, I'm not sure how to relate this to the death drive particularly or specifically, but it does seem like an aspect of fascism to want to fully automate something that has traditionally been so, warm and human despite its mechanical reproducibility, right? And the defining factors of the cinema are that, whether it's the original Buffy movie or the television series, right, that they show actors acting and shots of actors thinking,
Yes.
experiencing emotions, whatever they are, and that is kind of the basis of cinema, which is the human face, an actual face photographed, and hopefully the actor is able to convey, thought and emotion to the audience through the direction and through their talent and through everything that happens in front of a camera. So AI is the opposite of that. And, it's clear that the studio's goal is to reduce labor costs to nothing. Even though, one of the things that Bob Iger at Disney complained about throughout the year of Last Week in End Time Cinema was how expensive it was to make all these Disney live action remakes. He's constantly complaining about the cost of doing this. So when you hear these kind of complaints from people, you understand why they want to use AI. And you can eliminate actors completely with AI as long as you have their voice recorded. You can create characters in animated movies with just that. So I mean, the Marvel system of making movies, Marvel Disney, was already kind of a proto AI.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right.
There's computer effects in it are longing for AI, and Stranger Things looks more like a Marvel movie to me than it looks like cinema. So this is their goal, and I don't think it's any mistake or any coincidence that all this is happening at the same time.
Yeah.
That AI, IP, the Trump administration, the acronyms AI, IP, ICE, they're all happening at once. I think it was a real interesting moment when Trump tweeted out that AI created a clip of a fighter pilot dropping shit on protesters.
Yeah.
That to me was a real, important thing in the history of American visual culture. I mean, I don't know if people will see it that way in the future, but in this moment, it seems to me that it is. And that's the kind of future of entertainment envisioned by the studios.
And I think that maps on very neatly to the other trends that are already on the table for us, right? Which is like the convergence of film or like multimedia convergence of this thing that we'll call IP, right? Whether it be the fact that every Marvel movie has an accompanying TV series, to the fact that, you're supposed, instead of getting that hard ending, like fade to black, stick around for after the credits and you'll get a scene featuring the characters from the next movie. So don't worry, your friends exist forever. Just keep coming back, right? There's this kind of like, I'm not quite saying it's like, we will all dwell in like the 1,000-year Reich of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Though it is kind of interesting that they have more ambitious 5-year plans than
it's interesting that you mentioned the 1,000-year Reich, because as someone who was a former branding professional, the 1,000-year Reich is the goal of every brand. Okay.
Yeah.
And it never works. It never works. Even Marvel, the existence of like Deadpool and Wolverine, which makes fun of this kind of idea, proves the fallacy of this kind of corporate capitalist thinking. Okay, there is no 1,000-year Reich for any of these brands, but they all somewhere in their hearts think that they are Coca-Cola.
And that is the death drive of it, right? We're going to keep repeating.
Yes.
We're going to keep, the only thing that we can envision for the future is an ever more like hollow, extracted reprise of the past.
Yeah.
Even using literal technologies that are like destroying the planet or that all run on the war machine, right? And that level, like I think about, I'm haunted by this Benjamin quote that's coming back to me. We've kind of invoking him with like the aura or this idea of like, you have a human actor, right? But there's that line from the Philosophy of History essay where he writes, the only historian capable of fanning the spark of hope in the past is the one who is also firmly convinced that even the dead will not be safe from the enemy if he is victorious.
Exactly. Yes, that's very true. And, you know, that applies to, strangely enough, Rotten Tomatoes, which, you know, I write about.
Yeah.
And one thing I didn't write about is the way that now Rotten Tomatoes goes into the past and finds film critics from like the 1930s and applies their reviews to the tomato meter.
No shit.
So one of them is Frank Nugent, who was John Ford's screenwriter. He became a great screenwriter, but he started as a critic in the New York Times. So now you will find, of course, he's been dead for many, many decades. You will find that Frank Nugent is a tomato meter approved critic now. Okay, so they go back into the past and they grab these things to create their Rotten Tomatoes score now. It's similar to how the Mormon, you know, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you know, finds people and says, well, they're actually a Mormon now. Albert Einstein was a Mormon. That's what all this kind of AI stuff is doing. It's the same thing as that. Now, you know, Frank Nugent has no say in any of this at all, right? But were he still with us, I'm not sure that he would be happy about that. But you know, the concerns of the dead are non-existent. You know, you can do anything with this stuff now, supposedly.
Yeah, it seems like there's this kind of, and here again, I'm thinking about like these kind of programs of like participation where everyone gets to, you no longer have to sit still for 90 minutes to watch a movie. And I don't want to sound like a nostalgic in a bad way. I have a difficulty sitting still myself, but like this idea of entering into that space without immediately having a take, right? Or like flattening to like, well, I'm seeing this thing, therefore it must, the simple fact that this is being shown means that this is bad, or like they're endorsing this, like all these other kind of very flat, like lines of escape from encountering an artistic text. I'm always so struck by these promises that are given both by, you know, sensible executives, but also just like boosters online being like, well, someday using AI, you can recast any movie that you want on streaming to feature your favorite actors in real time.
Or your family or your loved ones.
It sounds like hell.
Yeah, well, it is a description of hell. You know, it's a zombified form of entertainment.
Yeah, and when you throw in stuff like, you know, people using Grok to be like, no, make this person what they are, but undress them. I mean, it becomes even more malignant.
I mean, obviously, you know, this is not a good situation to be in. None of this stuff is regulated and so on. I mean, none of this is good. There should be more than 3 studios, you know. I mean, these places keep merging. There's going to be 3, there's going to be 2, and so on. None of this is good. You know, I mean, I'm not opposed. People are already criticizing nostalgia or, you know, looking back at other times and saying, well, it was better. You know, this is like seen as an illness to do that. I don't believe that that's true anymore. You know, I think I think nostalgia has changed. The nature of nostalgia has changed in the 21st century. To not being melancholic so much as it used to be perceived, but to being more, you know, politically informed, you know, which was also a criticism of nostalgia, that it's not sufficiently politically informed. But now it is politically informed, you know, to a larger extent than it used to be. So now this becomes a weapon to use against this kind of full automation that is going to ruin all this stuff. And the studios are banking on people getting used to that kind of entertainment. And they've been leading them slowly to get used to that kind of entertainment through superhero movies, through animated family movies, through the things that reliably make them the most money and which are not subject to criticism.
Scott, what do you mean by nostalgia as being more politically informed now?
I mean, that one of the criticisms against nostalgia was that it had a view of the past that was not sufficiently political. So, you know, like Make America Great Again,
Right.
You know, for whom, you know, there's a lot of people, you know, in the whatever era the MAGA people are referring to, there were a lot of people for whom life was not great.
Yes, of course.
That was terrible, you know. And that's the kind of nostalgia that is justifiably criticized. I'm talking about a different kind.
Okay. I think we're on the same page. Yeah.
The capacity to think about loss, even, right? Like what we're losing or what has been actually being. I'm back to that frame rate metaphor again. It's like the speed at which things are being cut and packaged and distributed and reactions being demanded is somehow excessive. And something is being lost even in us in that process.
Well, what's being lost is the idea that any of this stuff matters, whether it's a television show or a movie. It's just going to be replaced by something else within the next hour.
Yeah, the non-fungibility of the thing. Yeah. The singularity of the thing, whether that's a movie or a person.
And yet when films are made that exhibit all those qualities, people like them.
Yes.
Still.
Yeah.
You know,
we
whether
do.
it's One Battle After Another or, you know, a number of other films I could name right now. The Secret Agent, you know, is out now. People still like this. It's a lie that people don't like this stuff. You know, and they bolster this lie by box office numbers.
Mm.
You know, but you can always say, well, Zootopia 2 made so much more money than One Battle After Another. You know, and you know, this is all very bad. This constant resort to box office, which, you know, I don't really even quite believe anymore. It's not good for the art form. It's good for the studios because they can then say, this is the kind of film we should make and only this kind of film. But I don't think the audience is with that at all. Just like I don't think the audience is going to accept AI. And yet, there is the family film audience that seems like it will accept anything. There's no bottom, and that doesn't matter to them. That's the phenomenon that's interesting to me. But, you know, I hate to be negative.
No, I'm with you, yeah.
I do struggle with this nostalgia thing, I have to say, because I've tended, probably until the last decade, to really sternly admonish myself if I'm feeling nostalgic, to say, you know, nostalgia is a trap. Nostalgia is nostalgia for a time that never was. And certainly, you know, the example of MAGA is an excellent one. I had a friend or I still have a friend, but when we were in graduate school, we had a professor who's always talking like, I wish I could just go back to Jena when like Hegel and co were there, and it just would have been this time of intellectual ferment and so exciting. And she raised her hand and was like, yeah, but you know, I really like being able to vote and read.
Right.
And you know, I think that's like an important reminder. And yet I do find myself in this position. You know, I'm not as worried. I mean, I'm less worried about film than I am about books. Like those are occupational, you know, hazards.
Yeah.
But I am very, very worried in a way that makes me feel like I'm a million years old. Very worried about teaching students that don't like to read or don't really know how to read. And I think these are very similar.
Yeah. It's totally related. Yeah.
I think they're totally related. And so this is why I was kind of poking at you to be like, what is this like politically informed conception of nostalgia, right?
Well, the first thing is that I do not care about relevance. So, you know, if kids are not reading, they should be reading, and they have to get their minds around that, or else. I mean, I don't understand this coddling of people who don't want to read stuff, and irrelevance and being opposed to nostalgia, to me, are linked in that they're both the concerns of baby boomers. Baby boomers always want to be relevant, even if they're 102, whatever age they're going to live to. They're always going to be concerned about being relevant. And they love technology. I wrote about this in the intro, too.
Yes.
So technology, their embrace of any new technology comes along, is their way of being relevant. Okay? And technology is the great destroyer of nostalgia. Okay, so we forget about what life was like before we had, you know, smartphones, earbuds, you know, whatever things come along, you know, streaming movies, social media. We forget about what life was like before that. But is it nostalgic to have preferred life before we were working on laptops every day, which is just the new loom? There's no difference between working on a laptop and working on a loom, except you're at home, and you can't form a union. Okay, so it's technology and the baby boomer quest for relevance that has made nostalgia a dirty word. There's a piece in my book about movies about brands. It's called The Work of Nostalgia, I think, in which there's this idea that nostalgia is bad, but movies about brands, for instance, or movies about superheroes that were invented in the 60s, these things are not nostalgic and they're good because they make a lot of money. The superhero movies are the characters in those movies were created in the past, yet they're somehow still relevant to today. Yet nostalgia does not factor into this in any discussions about it. And that's because there's a difference between nostalgia and what the writer, philosopher, academic in Georgia, Grafton Tanner, calls foreverism. We're living in a world now that's defined by foreverism. The Marvel characters will never go away. Mickey Mouse will never go away. Batman will never go away. Okay. And yet, liking and enjoying a new Batman movie or making it or directing it, writing it is not seen as an exercise in nostalgia, because these kinds of things are about preserving these money-making items from the past in the present so that they continue to make money. So we have to invent or describe different kinds of nostalgia now. There's the nostalgia of like, well, I wish I didn't have to be on a laptop every day. I didn't sign up for this when I was born, and like, oh, I love Batman movies because
I do
of
love Batman movies.
What?
I said I do love Batman
Okay,
movies.
well,
Actually, it's not true. I only like the ones
Nolan
before.
ones?
No, I hate Christopher Nolan so
the
much.
Tim Burton ones.
I only like the Tim Burton ones.
Okay, well, that's nostalgia, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't care about any Batman movie really. I actually liked The Batman with Robert Pattinson.
I haven't seen that yet.
I mean, so what if I like that? There's no reason to make that movie except for foreverism. So, for baby boomers, the past, the nostalgia hating baby boomers who are essentially in charge of foreverism, the past to them was a stupid, silly thing, right? Except for World War II, maybe. The rest of it is all like, howdy doody, howdy doody show and like bomb shelters and, bomb shelter movies and, ducking and covering in school. They have this view that the past is endlessly silly and stupid and you should just make fun of it all the time. Okay. But that way of thinking goes hand in hand with, oh, I got to get an iPhone 18. So, I'm opposed to that. So when I talk about nostalgia, I don't mean thinking that there was a golden age when, life was perfect for certain people. I just mean, I wish I didn't have a smartphone. It's not necessary.
I feel that like very deeply.
It's also like, I think about this in the sense of like, I have nostalgia for the time my dad, who worked, 60, 70-hour weeks, at one point just pulled me out of school one afternoon to play hooky, and we went to see Raiders of the Lost Ark. Right now, look, it's a fun movie, right? But my nostalgia, my yearning for this thing, it's a thing that happened, and I understand it was both like, again, the trip in the middle of the afternoon to an empty movie theater. This experience with my dad. I think he gave me a wiffle ball bat too. I don't know what else was going on. It was really nice. It came up huge. I do not, I don't know, like expect another film, let alone castigate writers or producers or form like stalker collectives online to hunt down people for failing to give me, in the latest iteration of that IP, the feeling that I had when I was 12.
Right.
Like that's a category confusion. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when the last Indiana Jones movie came out, The Dial of Destiny, a lot of people did that. And the director, James Mangold, said the problem with the audience is they don't realize that people get old and die.
Bingo.
So the other anti-nostalgia thing for the baby boomers is their bizarre idea that somehow they will achieve immortality through not dying, not through their work, but through actually not dying. It's a Woody Allen joke from, an ancient Woody Allen joke. I want to achieve immortality by not dying, not by any work that I do. But they believe that. They've embraced that. That's who Larry Ellison is. He's a man that thinks he's going to live forever. He's an 80, however old man who looks like he's 50, who just thinks he's going to live forever somehow. And, there was 2 different documentaries that came out last year about men who are trying to become immortal. Yeah, this is the opposite of nostalgia. As the world gets worse, they think they're going to live forever, and it won't be bad for them, So, I don't object to appeals to nostalgia, anymore. And I think it's a knee-jerk kind of academic reaction to be down on nostalgia in general. And it's a generational difference. It really is. And it's one that people should, I don't think younger people even have this concept.
Oh, I don't know about that. My students are 18 to 22. And
they're nostalgic.
They are constantly being like, Abby, tell me about what it was like when you didn't have a phone. Like, tell me about what it was like.
Well,
they actually are super nostalgic for a time that never was.
For a time that they never experienced.
Yes, that they never experienced. They are very, very, very into like that kind of thing. Like, it's like the best fairy tale for them, the best bedtime story.
I think it's natural to want to live in a world where you're not chained to these devices.
Yeah. And where people can't track you all the time. I think it's really, really normal.
Right. And that you have to pay subscription fees for too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I mean, when I'll be like, no one knew where you were and nobody had the ability to know where you were. You could be in a different country.
And nobody cared.
Right. Yeah.
Which was the best part in a way.
It is the best part. It is totally the best part. But yeah, it is interesting to me to see that the Zoomers actually, some of them find that terrifying, but about half of them are like, that we were robbed. Like
they were. Well, in fact, they were
actually
robbed.
were
Be
robbed.
conscious of that fact. They were in
correct.
fact have been robbed. Yes.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a story from the 90s. Speaking of nostalgia.
Yeah.
I have a friend named Jen Collins who listens to your show all the time. She's a big fan of your podcast. And she, in fact, is like a social worker therapist. I'm not sure her exact, designation is. But I told her this story years ago, and she told me I should tell it on your podcast.
Okay.
So in the 90s, I was very depressed. And I was having a lot of trouble getting over it. I didn't realize that it was like a permanent condition then. I thought it was treatable somehow, which I no longer feel. So now I'm fine with it. And now I just see it as an infinitely expanding universe. But back then I was very depressed and it was bothering me and it was affecting me, affecting my relationships. So Prozac was really big then. So I decided I should take Prozac. But, I didn't have health insurance. But there was a clinic in my neighborhood, which was Allston, Massachusetts, where you could go and be treated for, psychological problems or mental health issues, whatever they were calling them then, for free. But you just had to be interviewed by some kind of therapist. So I went to this therapist because I wanted Prozac. That was the only reason I was going. And he had to interview me. And he was a recent graduate. And he had his diploma on the wall, but he was younger than me. I was young then, but he was like 23. And he looked like Archie Andrews from the Archie comics. He had the red hair with the crosshatch in it. And he was asking me about my life. And I said something that was depressing about my life. But then I started to laugh after I said it. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, well, that was a very depressing story that you just told. Why did you start to laugh after you told it? I said, well, it's like Samuel Beckett said, there's nothing funnier than unhappiness. And he said to me, so this Samuel Beckett, is he like a trusted mentor, a relative to confide in? A former teacher or professor of yours? Is he your uncle? Is he your cousin? Something like that? I said, yeah, he's my uncle. My Uncle Sam. So Jen Collins wanted me to tell you that story, and now I've done so.
That is totally
Shout out Jen Collins for bringing that into the Ordinary Unhappiness universe. Amazing.
Yeah. It's about the immortality stuff and about cinema as a medium that seems close to death, not moribund, but in terms of its like phenomenology and existential stakes.
It's flirting with death.
Yeah,
but cinema has always flirted with death.
I found myself looking up that monologue that I mentioned, where the Yakuza at the beginning of the Tampopo film describes, what he does or doesn't want. I won't spoil what happens in Tampopo, but people should go watch Tampopo. I'm not going to ask you what your favorite movie is. I don't have to do that. I will say it's one of my personal favorite movies. You kind of would have them, but
Sarah Miller told him not to ask you that.
We're not going to ask you that. I did come across this bit and I had forgotten specifically what he says here, but this is to set the stage for this, right? He's talking about, he hates people eating in movies. You know how some people eat potato chips and crinkle wrappers. I really hate it. And then he finds some hapless guy who's doing just this and like looms over him and is like, huh, tasty? And the guy says, yeah, curry flavor. And I think he grabs the bag and throws it away and yells, "Make that noise after the film starts and I might kill you. You hear me? I also won't tolerate watch alarms beeping. But," and this is what made me think of this, "here's what I really don't want interrupted. They say at the moment of your death, you see a sort of short film, your whole life, kaleidoscope before your eyes. I'm really looking forward to that. A person's last film. And I don't want it interrupted. Darling, please don't die. Stuff like that. None of that for me, you hear? And now, look, our own movie's starting."
That's awesome. I've completely forgotten that.
Oh, I guess we have to rewatch Tempopo.
I saw a very good Itami film recently called Supermarket Woman that I recommend to you.
Ooh.
One of the best films about supermarkets.
Scott, it has been such a pleasure to talk with you, to think with you, to read you over these last few weeks. I will put links in the show notes to both of the new books and also to The Earth Dies Streaming. But is it possible that you might have some events coming up that our listeners might find you at?
Yes, as a matter of fact, on January the 28th, I'm going to be at Porter Square Books in Cambridge, Mass, doing a discussion about my new books with the critic Sean Burns. And then on the 29th, I'm going to be at the Brattle in Harvard Square, where I used to work as a projectionist, showing 2 films and signing books. And the movies will be Nouvelle Vague, the Richard Linklater film, and Vulcan Isadora by Joel Petrikis, which is one of the best films of last year that no one really talked about very much. And then on the 31st, I'll be at Metrograph in New York City, in the Lower East Side, also showing 2 films and doing a signing. And the 2 films for that date are another double feature you didn't know you wanted to see, which is Ace in the Hole by Billy Wilder with Kirk Douglas and Land of the Dead by George Romero.
Nice.
And then after that, I'm going to Cleveland. I feel like a comedian, going on tour, which is not how I really want to feel. But I'll be at the Cleveland Cinematech on February 5th, I believe it is. And I'll be showing 2 Jafar Panahi films. The films are going to be The Circle and It Was Just an Accident. And then after that, I'm going to all sorts of other cities. I'm going to Chicago, Los Angeles, Louisville, Durham, North Carolina. I'm going to Dartmouth. I'm going to Wesleyan. I'm doing a lot of appearances for these books. So thank you for having me on the show.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Ordinary Unhappiness. Ordinary Unhappiness is completely supported and kept ad-free for everyone by the generous support of our Patreon community. If you'd like to support the show and get 2 additional paywalled episodes per month, including our journey through Freud's Standard Edition, come find us at patreon.com/ordinaryunhappiness. This has been an episode of Ordinary Unhappiness, a podcast about psychoanalysis, politics, pop culture, and the ways we suffer now. I'm Abby Kluchin, and today I was joined by Patrick Blanchfield and A.S. Hamrah. This podcast is produced by Dan Yowell. Theme music by Formal Chicken.